Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. My guest today is Marcilynn Burke, the Dave Frohnmayer Chair in Leadership and Law and the Dean of the University of Oregon's School of Law. Dean Burke came to Oregon Law in July 2017, becoming the first black female dean in the law school's 134-year history. Before arriving in Eugene, she was Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the University of Houston Law Center from 2015 to 2017. During 2009 through 13, she served in the Obama administration at the U.S. Department of the Interior. Initially, she was appointed as the Deputy Director for Programs and Policy for the Bureau of Land Management. President Obama later appointed her as the Acting Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management at the Department of the Interior, where she oversaw four bureaus, including the Bureau of Land Management. Following her service at the Department of the Interior, she returned to the University of Houston Law Center, where she had been a member of the faculty since 2002. Burke's research interests include leadership, property, environmental, and natural resources law. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and what led to your interest in environmental and natural resources law.
I'm a native North Carolinian and the child of public school educators, and I've always liked school. As I watched my parents and their advocacy in our community, I wanted to model that, but in a different way. And I love Perry Mason. Mm-hmm. So that led me to law school. And while in law school, I did not go there with the intention of becoming an environmental and natural resources lawyer. But my favorite professor led me down that path, demonstrating the power of one teacher in one's life, and that's where it all began.
So what attracted you to the University of Oregon?
The Environmental and Natural Resources program is well regarded throughout the country, and I was very familiar with that program and the faculty and the work that they do in the community and with the students. And I also was aware of other strengths of the law school, such as the Alternative Dispute Resolution program, which is ranked 6th in the country, and the Legal Research and Writing program, which is ranked 3rd in the country.
Are there other things that you've learned about our law school since your arrival?
I have. I've learned that in addition to those 3 centers of excellence, there are a number of other areas in which we have great strength. And one of them that we're going to focus on in the next couple of years is our business law program. And so that, along with our children and family law program, is very strong, as well as our public policy program. So
you've now been here just over a year. Tell us some of the challenges that you've tackled during your tenure.
I don't know if I consider them challenges, but some
Excellent.
of the things that have been occupying my time. So one thing is strategic planning. It was about time to engage in that endeavor, and no one's really ever excited about strategic planning, but we know that it's something that we need to do to really examine what have we been doing, what's going well, where do we need to adjust. And so that has led to this focus in business law that we will be pursuing in the next few years. I've also spent a lot of time just getting out into the community and getting to know our alumni and friends. And that hasn't been a challenge. That has actually been a lot of fun.
Oh, good. So last year, the law school received a $1.8 million grant from the Oregon Community Foundation. What are those funds being used for?
They were divided between 2 of our programs, our nonprofit clinic and our Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center. The nonprofit clinic, quite frankly, would not exist without the benefit of grants. And in that instance, our students, along with our faculty, help nonprofit organizations in Oregon sort of get their affairs in order. And we've helped almost 70 different nonprofit organizations in the state of Oregon since its existence. On the other hand, the Environmental and Natural Resources Center has a number of sources of support, but this grant was very important in order to to help us in the way that we like to teach our students and have an impact on the community. So our students are able to work together with faculty members on real world problems, helping real world organizations solve those problems. They're also able to do that during the school year as fellows and also during the summer as interns at state and local government, tribal governments, nonprofit entities, et cetera.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. So I know one of the things you're interested in, and I know it's a priority of the president as well, is to increase enrollment of students from underrepresented populations. So how is the law school addressing that challenge?
We are working, we've increased our outreach, and I do that personally as well as the admissions team, has increased our outreach to schools that have higher populations of underrepresented groups, also with affinity groups and state and local bar associations, getting the word out, and also making sure that people know that this would be a good place to start their legal career. Because Oregon is not, the population of Oregon, right, is fairly homogeneous compared to other parts of the country. And so it's really important that we get the word out that this is a place where you can come and not just survive, but thrive.
So last year, the UO presented the Freedom of Expression series. And I understand that you've played a role in that project. I know we just had the first event a week ago. Is that right?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay. Okay. Well, correct me, please do. So, what can you tell us about that?
That may have been the last event, actually.
I see.
So, the project was one that President Schuld asked me and the dean of the School of Journalism and Communication to co-chair this effort. In recognition of the discussions and turmoil, quite frankly, that was occurring on college campuses across the country. And President Schuld wanted to make sure that we had a dialogue that was befitting of a university, of an institution of higher learning. And it was quite, I think, visionary to say, here are some funds. Let's talk to all of our academic units and think about the ways in which they can engage in this dialogue. And so I say that may have been the last one because it really was a one-year project, but we have some events that are spilling over into this year. I see,
okay. So I'm going to switch gears to talk about your previous experience before you came here. So what led to your service with the U.S. Department of the Interior's Bureau of Land Management? How'd you wind up there?
I have two answers to that, right? There's the one that's very much so politically acceptable, and then there's the real answer.
Okay.
So the politically acceptable answer is that my scholarship in the field of environmental and natural resources, my teaching, and my practical experience led me there. Quite frankly, I would say only God knows. It was just one of those things that came together. So I was on the radar for people who were on the transition team for the Obama administration as someone that could bring to bear, I think, some academic work as well as practical experience.
So tell us about some of the policies you worked on while you were working there.
I think I spent more of my time than I ever anticipated working on oil and gas leasing reform. And this is really important. I thought I would go in and I would do a lot of work on renewable energy, right? That was the sort of, flavor du jour, as it were. But oil and gas is still very important to the economy of the United States, and the federal government plays a tremendous role in determining how and where and when that is produced domestically. And so part of our mission was to try to get back into better balance the various goals that the BLM has. And so the Bureau of Land Management has what's called a multiple use mission.
Okay.
And many people think that means you can do anything all the time, anywhere on federal public lands. That's not what it means. It means that there are some uses that are compatible and there are some that are incompatible. And what we have to do is decide when and where and how we're going to allow use of the public lands.
Okay, so the BLM is the largest landholder in the U.S. West. So when you were serving, how was the Bureau addressing land use controversies involving grazing, extraction, and access?
Very carefully. It is an entity that is set up for conflict, I would say, right? Because the mission is to preserve, sustain natural resources, cultural resources for the benefit of present and future generations, right? So you have to be present-minded as well as future-minded. And in addition to the uses that you named, grazing and energy development, there's also natural and cultural resources, preservation, there's recreation, there are just a number of uses. And so again, what we tried to do was make sure that we listened to all of our relevant stakeholders and came out to the best decision that we thought was good for both present and future generations of Americans.
So when you were at the BLM, the Secretary of the Interior was Obama nominee Ken Salazar. How would you characterize his focus while he was the Secretary for the Bureau?
I think, again, it goes back to balance. The Department of the Interior is made up of 9 different bureaus, and all have different missions, right? And so how do you lead that group of what appears to be quite disparate interests in a way that they can work together more effectively? And so I think that was part of his mission. So people think of the BLM and the National Park Service, for example, as being quite opposed. But part of his leadership was to help us to work more effectively together.
So we're now in a different administration. The Department of the Interior is being run by Ryan Zinke. I think it's fair to say that among certain groups of Americans, his leadership has been controversial. Do you have any thoughts about his focus, what his focus is, or how you would characterize his approach to this challenge? And given the role that you played, how do you feel about where the department is and where the Bureau of Land Management is now?
That's a big question. So let me start with how I feel. And oftentimes I feel heartbroken because we worked really hard, the political appointees along with the career civil servants, to try to strike the right balance, we thought. And so a number of those big items, oil and gas leasing reform, for example, have been undone. Yet, elections have consequences. We expect there to be change, and that's what people voted for, was change. So I think that Secretary Zinke is doing a good job in carrying out the mandates of the president.
Okay. So you've worked extensively in the government and extensively in the academy. How would you compare those 2 kinds of employment, those 2 kinds of activity?
They're very similar.
Ah, interesting.
Very similar. So we have very important missions, great responsibility for those that we are supposed to be taking care of, stewarding, leading. We both have tight budgets. We have sort of what seems like endless possibilities, and there are multiple constituencies, right? So on any given day, whether I was in that position or this one, each action that I take, I have to think about how it's going to affect a broad spectrum of people. So very similar.
So are there any, there must be some things that are different.
The size of the budget.
Okay.
My budget at the Department of the Interior was about $1.8 billion. So that is not my budget here at the University of Oregon. About 12,000 employees across the 4 bureaus that I oversaw, so it's smaller. So those are some differences, but it's really striking in its similarity.
Do you think there's a kind of educational component to serving in the government?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things about the best government, I believe, is one in which is transparent and one in which explains decision making. And so one of the things we do in the regulatory sphere is we propose a rule, right, and we put it out for public comment. And then the public comments back. And one of the things we do is to explain, why we're accepting this comment and making a change, why we're not doing this, and also how we think we've addressed your concern, but perhaps in a different way. So it's very much so educational.
And this is just something that's always been a curiosity for me, the relationship between political appointees and career civil servants in these you know, obviously the career employees, they serve whoever is the political. What's your experience in terms of your sense of the people that are these career government employees, how they tend to view that fact that they, you know, an election happens and all their bosses are changed?
Right.
I mean, that seems like that in some ways, I mean, I suppose that can happen in the academy.
Yes, and it does.
Yes, I mean, it has happened here, but there are other places where you know, the leadership stays stable for a very long time.
Right.
What was the experience like? I mean, when you know, you're a fairly early appointee. Mm-hmm. What did you feel about that aspect of it?
Well, I was in my position for longer than the average political appointee. Mm-hmm. So when you get past the secretary, the deputy secretary, after that, I believe it was about 18 months. And I was there for 42 months.
Wow.
So I was an old timer. I was in the original Dream Team photograph, right? So I was different in that regard. But one of the things, perhaps the only thing I remember about my training as a political senior executive servant, was that career people look at political appointees, and some of them, all they see is a clock on your forehead. Right? And so you will leave, for better or for worse. You will not be here for long. And one of our solicitors, one of the lawyers for the department, said, "You're the A team and we're the B team." And I said, "What are you talking about? We're all the dream team." And she said, "No. We be here when you be gone." Right? So there was a definite, you know, there's a sense, right? It's a constant turnover, and that's part of our system. In law schools, I believe the current average tenure of a law school dean in this country is about 3.5 years.
Is that right?
Yes.
Huh. Interesting.
So in that regard, it is not very different.
Huh. Well, I'm learning tons of new things. So let's go back to the University of Oregon and the Oregon law. So what kind of collaborative endeavors are you pursuing with Oregon law and other UO colleges and schools? Yes.
So before I became quite well underway was the law school's partnership with what's now the College of Design and the Sustainable Cities Initiative. And so we continue through the Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center to work closely with that initiative. And indeed, we're hiring a new faculty member that we think that we want to play a significant role in that partnership. We're recruiting for that right now.
So that person will be joint appointed in design and in law?
No, they'll be fully a law professor, but someone who has an interest in the sustainability and environmental justice, land use, those sorts of things. We're also working on partnerships with the Lundquist College of Business. I met with the dean yesterday, and we're sort of regularly meeting as we continue to look at our business law program and how we might leverage our existing expertise to make the University of Oregon a real destination for those interested in business and law.
Okay. Are you able to do any research as a dean? Or let me put it this way. If you were able to do research as a dean, what are the kind of research projects that you're interested in?
Right. Well, I have committed to speaking at a symposium this spring in energy. Well, 2 symposia in energy this spring. So up to this point, I have not had time. I'm about to make time.
You're about to make time. So, okay, so I have a similar question, which is, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, you haven't been doing any teaching either.
That's correct.
Is that something that is going to happen in the future, do you think, while you're dean, or is this being dean make it impossible?
It's not impossible. That certainly deans have done it and will do it. However, when I came, it was very clear how important it was for us to reach out to our alumni and friends. And so I spend a lot of time doing that, making it really impractical for me to have a regular class. One area, though, I'm excited about having an opportunity to interact with students on a more regular basis is through our new Frohnmayer Leadership Program.
Okay.
So one of the things that attracted me to Oregon was knowing that friends and alumni of the law school had created an endowment to support what I think will be the premier leadership program on the West Coast for law schools. And so I will be teaching, workshops and at retreats in that program.
Can you say a little bit about that program?
We lawyers, right, are expected to be leaders, right? So whether it's in the law firm practice or the legislature, in our communities, we take on these roles. However, heretofore, we have not spent a lot of time formally training law students to be leaders. And so let's be more intentional about that. We know that's the role they're going to play in society. So let's equip our students. That will also, in a way, distinguish them from other law graduates who've had some formal training. So there'll be exposure for all of our law students, those being one of the things we want to make sure they leave with certain competencies. But also for those that are particularly interested, we'll have a special program where they'll go through retreats and workshops and a class in leadership. And this spring, we're actually hosting a TEDx U Oregon.
Oh, interesting.
In February, and that's a part of this leadership program to bring in thought leaders to the university.
Do you know who any of those people are going to be yet?
We just opened the application last week.
On that, so you're part of the curriculum for all law students will require?
It's a co-curricular program.
I see. Very interesting. So you've now been in Eugene at UO for a little over a year. Are there any interesting or surprising experiences that you've had that you would like to share with us?
I think interesting. Well, there's maybe surprising too. One is that the role in which the university and the law school play in the state of Oregon and the well-being of the state and the region, I had hoped it would be what it is, but it's even more than I anticipated. And I also see a lot of potential for us to really be the locus of reform and innovation here in the state.
So could you characterize a little bit what that relationship is like at the moment between the law school and the state?
Let's see. I was at a Lane County Bar Association luncheon a couple of weeks ago, and the Attorney General of the state of Oregon was speaking. Well, she's a double duck. And she gave a great shout out to the university and to the law school. And at that luncheon, there were judges, other leaders of law firms and public interest groups. They were ducks, right? So they're law ducks. And so everywhere that I go, the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court is a law alum. So we really are running the state in that regard.
Do those people, these alumni who have gone on to have distinguished legal roles in the state, do they come and speak to the law school? Do they visit the law school?
All the time, all the time. They are great friends of the law school, and they provide internship possibilities for our students as well. So yes, they absolutely give back.
So I've read that you enjoy gospel singing. We have an amazing gospel choir at the University of Oregon. Have you had the opportunity to do any singing or watch the choir or anything?
I've seen the choir several times, and actually on Tuesday I went to my first choir rehearsal.
Oh, good for you.
So we'll see if that works with my schedule and their schedule.
You're going to be singing with them?
That is a possibility.
Okay. You mentioned, that the tenure of law professors is 3 years.
The deans.
The tenure of deans is 3 years. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that your tenure is, you obviously have you have a track record of lengthier tenures than is typical in the positions that you've had. So let's just suppose for a moment that you stay for longer than 3 years. Are there any other longer term projects that you haven't told us about that you're dreaming of? I mean, or maybe a way to put this is, whenever you're done, And if you were to look back on your tenure, what would be your dream sort of configuration of accomplishments at that point? What would be like one or two things that you really hope will be accomplished during your tenure?
Okay. One, I hope that the law school will be more diverse and more inclusive. So this year we welcome the most diverse class of students in the history of the law school. And I'm very excited about that. We have a long way to go. All right, so I've been described as diversity is, being invited to the dance, and inclusivity is asking you to dance. Lots of problems with that analogy, but we're going to work with that. And I think that it's not only being asked to dance, but it's you deciding what the music is going to be. You being a part of the decision about whether there'll be a dance or not. Right? So it's about really being a part of the community and being seen as a leader and equal member of the community. And so that I would hope that at the end of my tenure, whenever that might be, that this will be a more diverse and inclusive law school. The other hope is that will be a more resource-rich law school. And so, as you know, for law schools across the country, we experienced a precipitous decline in enrollment, and we are slowly edging our way back up. And so we've all worked very diligently on right-sizing our institutions, and we've worked very hard to keep our expenses in check. And so we just want to make sure that we're continuing to have a program that will continue to attract the best and the brightest, and that's whether it's faculty, staff, or students.
Okay, well, that's a wonderful place for us to stop. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Marcilynn Burke, the Dave Frohnmayer Chair in Leadership and Law, and the Dean of the University of Oregon's School of Law. Thanks so much for watching.